Well, it's about time I did another video, and this is the Advent season coming to an end. We just celebrated yesterday the fourth Sunday of Advent, and in the last few months and maybe more, I have been struggling with various thoughts about the suffering in the world and whether God exists or cares, etc. We have the war in Ukraine and so many bad actors out there, so much needless suffering, so many idols, wealth and fame and whatever else drives people to miss the mark, which is one of the definitions of sin, really. I think in Hebrew and in Greek, hamartia and chatat, I think they both mean to not hit the nail on the head as we should. And lately, I've had some breakthroughs. I've been praying to God to somehow reveal Himself or make Himself present. And in fact, I have been experiencing this. One of my when they asked me on Facebook what my religion is, or something like that, I quoted Isaiah 45:15, which is said in the liturgy of the hours. Truly, you are a hidden God, or a God who hides Himself. And when Solomon dedicated the temple in 1 Kings 8:12, he says that Yahweh has wanted to dwell in a dense or dark cloud, which of course reminds one of the cloud of unknowing, which is a very interesting book. And I'm reading a biography, an official biography of Thomas Merton. I've never really been a huge fan of his, but now I'm getting to appreciate more what can be called his ambiguity or ambivalence, sort of hard to pin, as in some ways I may be. But I think it's part of this openness to a God who is fundamentally hidden and whose activity, if we can call it that. I have an article on my website as on God's providence or how He acts in history, etc. But discerning His presence is something that is of the essence of faith, where we, in this darkness, discern the same pattern and order and providence and wisdom and intelligence and omnipotence, etc., that is manifested in the natural world. So one of the things I've said in these videos is that the world is fundamentally very, very, very good with these vicissitudes or limitations of creation, earthquakes and shifts in faults or whatever the geographical, geological terminology is for all these things that cause earthquakes and tsunamis, etc., which we are supposed to try to work with and not make worse by mistreating the planet. but there's no escaping, certain natural catastrophes and of course illnesses. And so in that sense, it's not paradise. It's not a perfect world without suffering. But I've been thinking of how to, or asking God to allow me to discern Him. And then, as has often has happened in my now long life, sometimes a series of events take place that cause things to gel. And contemplative people, tend to be aware of this. I had reached, a rather, low point emotionally. I think perhaps traceable to the COVID pandemic and isolation and the interruption of various activities, one of which was my attendance at the so called young adults group of my church. This is a mostly an immigrant church, Mexican and Central American, in a missionary parish originally and still led by the Scalabrini fathers. We've had a series of them. And these are, simple people of faith that, as almost anyone, when we get to know them, reveal treasures of wisdom and other qualities. And we could say, in a word, that the good news of Jesus Christ is preached primarily to the poor. This comes, this is goes in hand with the preferential option for the poor. In other words, um, it's like your body. If there is a wound or a weaker part of your body, I have a bad knee, I walk with extreme care downstairs because the wrong move will exacerbate the arthritis and other problems in my right knee. Just like I have arthritic fingers that I avoid and I learn, to avoid and acquire the habit of treating these, let's say, weaker members or more vulnerable members with greater care. And I think God does the same thing, but certainly the real obligation is ours to do this work for God, so to speak. And so one night I was kind of having fun here in my apartment, but I decided just out of the blue, let's go to the meeting of the young adults that I had been going to for years. And they were about to celebrate their 20th anniversary. So this is a long-standing group that meets every Wednesday and discusses the Bible or has a speaker. Sometimes I've been invited to speak a little bit, and I was invited that day to speak a little bit about the Immaculate Conception. In fact, I think it was the Feast of the Immaculate Conception that day, or had just, was around that time. And so I was immediately welcomed. This is a group of people that doesn't have many of the hang-ups that people with greater pride or arrogance would have, more touchy feelings and things like that. So that to me, and I was with them yesterday, we're doing the posadas now every evening in the Mexican and Latin American tradition of sort of reenacting the search of the Holy Family for a place to spend the night and finding no room in the inn, or whatever you want to translate for that in Luke. And so I was present at this meeting last night, this second or third posada actually, and they asked if people wanted to say something, and I said I recalled the words of my esteemed Harvard Divinity School professor Helmut Kester when I took his course in 84, 85, 1984, 85. And he said, one of the things he said was that the greatest proof, I'm paraphrasing, of Jesus's divinity or power or whatever you want to call it is that he created community. And so as I looked around yesterday in this very small apartment that was hosting the third posada, and there were probably more than 30 people there, all were fed, uh, and all had seats basically. You know, I have a bigger apartment myself, and I wouldn't have that many seats, I don't think. But in any case, the presence of this community, the presence of people who, to me, in my long experience and studies, etc., really have the essential and one of the purest form of the Christian spirit that I have seen, and I've been in religious life. In religious life, there are very wonderful people and wonderful atmospheres that can be created. But probably, and this is where Francis of Assisi would come in, and even Saint Dominic and others, in simplicity and poverty and not having, the inclination to brag and to boast and to be better than another person, and all the vices that have ruined and are ruining this world. To be with people that are happy to celebrate the Christian faith amidst all the trials. When I watch the news and I watch the Spanish news, I watch the two national Spanish news that are aired. I watch a few minutes of CBS Nora O'Donnell, and it's all this hype of this breaking news or busy night, and it's all geared to excite you and to make you fearful and have to watch. To me, that is such manipulation for ratings. It's disgusting. It's awful. And what does that say about the audiences that supposedly these marketers are identifying as responsive to this kind of hyper excitement of the fearful breaking news? I even say Nora without the H would be like the Hebrew for fear or fearful. But in any case, so then I switch to the Spanish news, and many times they will be covering the border crisis, people escaping from great poverty and violence in Central America, especially, or in Cuba. And for me, these are real human beings seeking a better, life, and seeking to contribute to this country, as these people that I've been getting together with for years now, and especially the last few days, have manifested that they do. These are not what Trump described as rapists and drug dealers, and I suppose there are some good persons among them, which is why, to me, I refuse to even spell the guy's name. He's a monster and a great liar. And the fact that millions and millions of Americans support him is sign of a great cancer and great dementia, a double whammy illness that many people and in sort of the whole country is afflicted with. I repeat that probably the greatest, the issue that most Americans agree with, like 90%, is that America has a mental health crisis, and we have shootings that are the tip of the iceberg for that. So that um, getting together with this community and experiencing their faith, sharing it, being able to tie in with it because of my own experiences and choices that I made in the past, good ones for a change in many ways. I went to Mexico when I was 20. We lived out in the country. I would see the Masagua indigenous people. You know, Indian is not a word that is used, but the indigenous Masawa would come to our Tultenango ex hacienda, where we were doing the postulancy with the Dominicans, and they would come barefoot. They had no shoes. Their calloused heels were cracked, and coming in smelling of smoke because of the fires they would light in their poorly ventilated huts or whatever it was in 1973. Things have changed. I'm sure I was back there probably 10 years ago or so. And they would smell of smoke, but they would contribute to the collection basket. And I remember then in the capital of Mexico, at a fancy First Communion in this beautiful mansion with beautiful grounds and all these tables set up beautifully. And we had a mass, the Dominican priest had been invited to celebrate the mass, and we came along as students. I suppose we were now either novices or students, and there was tremendous embarrassment when the basket was passed around because they just weren't humble enough to just make their little contribution out of a sense of decency or whatever. So the point being that I can connect very well, pretty well, considering that I come from a very different background, a different country, different culture, different upbringing, different education, different everything in many ways, but not everything. And I can, relate to when I was out in the country and they would invite us to these humble houses to maybe drink some pulque and eat a few beans, they would say, and tortilla. So I've been with the people of the country, both in Mexico, in the Dominican Republic, and in other places. And so, in that sense, God, equipped me well to sort of leave my home and leave the gods of my fathers or whatever, and be able to feel at home with these friends who call me profe because they see me as the professor because I was a professor, and in some ways I still am. I like to call myself a teacher in the church, as Acts, I think 13 talks about listing who these teachers were, and prophets in the church, including Saul at the very end in chapter 13 of Acts. So this was a huge boost, and then shortly thereafter, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, we had the Our Lady of Guadalupe, December 12th. So we went, that was Monday, we went to the same church nearby here, Lady Queen of Peace, and we celebrated that, the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I consider myself sort of Mexican in many ways, even though I'm Cuban. Born because of my discovery of everything really in Mexico that mattered theologically and culturally and history wise and everything. As have done so many Cubans, good or bad. Jose Marti, the great apostle of Cuba, went to Mexico. Fidel Castro went to Mexico, and others have also gone to Mexico to return to Cuba later. So that was very important, and so I began to discern. Once then you get into this ambit, this space where you start the sort of the broken or static ridden line of communication with God is reestablished. Then with this hidden unknown God in this cloud of unknowing, we are in this communication again in a different way, a different maybe level. And so that is vivifying. That is vivifying. I want to read this a little bit from the cloud of unknowing. This is one of the things I put in my Facebook as in details about me, or favorite quotes. Of God himself no man can think, and therefore I would leave all that thing that I can think and choose to my love that thing that I cannot think. For why he may well be loved, but not thought. By love he may be gotten and holden, but by thought neither. And therefore, although it be good sometime to think of the kindness and the worthiness of God in special, and although it be a light and a part of contemplation, nevertheless in this work it shall be cast down, these human efforts, I guess, and covered with a cloud of forgetting, and thou shalt step above it stalwartly, but slyly, with a devout and a pleasing stirring of love, and long for to pierce that darkness above thee, and smite upon that thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love, and go not thence for thing that befalleth. So I would sort of summarize this as that the thinking, it could be a preparation, it could be necessary, but in the end, you're in this dark cloud where you feel God, we think above, and therefore you are sort of in connection again, and you can then, as a branch in the vine, receive the sap, if you will, and then mysterious things begin to happen, mysterious changes in yourself, which you become aware of without necessarily being able to or wanting to analyze too much. Uh, some of what you perceive could be called divestment, which I suppose this word divestment in Latin means to be unclothed or unprotected, or the opposite of investment. And it's a sort of detachment that is important so as not to interfere or to put roadblocks in the action of God. I have a close relative who has been stricken with a terrible malady that I don't want to be more specific about, but it is incapacitating in a serious and probably permanent way. And friends of this person have told me that uh, she is meeker and more patient, very similar to what I have mentioned at other times, and I mention all the time because it's really impressed me. You know, in the case of at least two very formerly tough men of triumph and business success, intelligence, worldly pleasures, strength. But when they get sick and old, they become meek as lambs. And so theologically, I associate this, of course, with what others have called purifications, where through this suffering, part of you becomes better inside, even though the earthly tent, as Paul would say in 2 Corinthians 5, I think, is crumbling. And that is similar to that operation table that I spoke about and thought about some years ago when I felt God had opened me up on this operating table and I didn't know when He was going to be done and when I would be sutured up again. And I thought to myself, for such a serious operation indicates a very serious malady. So that if one wants to complain that God allows or causes suffering needlessly, I think the correction would be no, it's needed for the perfection of our spirit, whether we like it or not. I mean, we didn't ask to be born, but we have been born. We have a life instinct. Sometimes we have a death instinct. Freud talked about that thanatos, you know, the death wish or something like that. But nevertheless, we're here and we are growing and we overcome these roadblocks or these hesitations, these doubts, these resentments, everything that is spiritually signs of disease. And the medicine is this purifying type of uh, suffering, something you undergo, something you carry, like a cross. As Pharaoh means something like carrying under or something like that. Suffer. And so I did want to talk about this. And then, of course, you make some resolutions about things you need to change and how to, again, correct your path, correct your trajectory, the road you're on. Uh, the letter to the Hebrews in that fantastic, well, got a lot of great chapters, but the letter to the Hebrews when it talks about correction, paideia, discipline, spare the rod, spoil the child idea, same words in Greek and Hebrew, musar, paideia, discipline, correction, even punishment. It says here, therefore, lift up those fallen or weak hands, demoralized hands, and the swollen knees, speaking of knees, and straightened for your feet those tortuous or crooked ways, so that you can walk straight. Remember, even in Isaiah, we have make a straight path for the Lord to come in chapter 40, which John the Baptist takes up, so that the lame one doesn't get, out of joint, but rather be healed. And so this forgiveness and healing go hand in hand, or healing and salvation go hand in hand. The woman with the blood flow, healed, safe, saved are interchangeable there. In Mark, you have an unusual rendering of the Isaiah 6 passage, lest they turn and I forgive them or heal them. Just various interchanges of these images that are really all become one thing that you sort of contemplate without distinction of elements, discursive, going from one thing to the other. It's more of a simple whole, which is this contemplative thing. And so, and Merton was very much into that. And yes, Merton seems to be like modern man, obsessed with himself and his thoughts. And that's one of the things that I sort of was turned off about. But given the fact that he was made that way or grew up that way, what he does with this personality God gave him is to write about it and then try to and share it with others so that they can learn from his reflections and experiences. And that's what how things work. So I've been seeing this activity of God in a very hidden manner, but like the cacti that I have in my windowsill, just a little water will do. In Mexico, they told me God has touched you. Just a little finger of God is enough. If you can be, prepared for it, or sometimes without being prepared, it's enough to light that fire, if you will, or to cause this change. It's like almost like if you tapped a boulder on some mountain or something and started an avalanche, or whatever other image of sudden and surprising results you could come up with. So that I think the essence of this message is that if you wait, this is something Habakkuk talks about. If you wait, it will come. You can emerge from the dark night of the soul. You might have to smite at that. I don't know what happened there. You might have to smack at that, smite at that cloud. smite upon that thick cloud of unknowing. Sort of knock on the door. Christ can knock on your door too, with a sharp dart of longing love. I suppose the longing part is clear. The love part, uh, you can say, is thrown in to this action of smiting, striking at this thick cloud of darkness in which God has chosen to dwell. 1 Kings 8. And do not leave that place or that position, no matter what happens, and go not thence for thing that befalleth. I've actually included, I like this so much, I included it in the, I guess, the original English, uh, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. I guess I could try, but I won't. And I translated it into Spanish and Italian, because I like it so much. Cloud of unknowing. And that's why, Merton also liked the Buddhists, and they liked him because, and Meister Eckhart. It seems that Merton went past St. John of the Cross, in his interests anyway, and got into Meister Eckhart, who is very much, and I'm not an expert on Meister Eckhart, but very much into this simplicity of not knowing, and all being one without these distinctions of elements. And so I just wanted to say these words, and God does warn us a little bit. And in Advent, it's a season of some kind of warning too. He's patient, but you really do need to straighten up and straighten those feet, so that the road be straight and not crooked. So that the whole struggle is with that, and the more we resist or don't listen or don't smite, um, progress will not be made, and sometimes you have to keep moving, like Karl Barth said, on this ridge we're on. He said it maybe in another sense, because you fall if you don't keep moving. That is the sense that Barth uh, said. You have to keep moving, because stopping is really failure, as if you were on a ridge and you had to keep moving, or else or the tightrope, or whatever you want to call it. And with that, just under 40 minutes or so, I am going to stop.